In this august moment when we are celebrating 100 years of a great, phenomenal, forward-looking institution, ACPR, it is my privilege and honor to be here with you this morning. And I thank Poddarji, Jirliji, and the other members of the team for having bestowed this honor upon me. ನನಗೆ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಬೈಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬರ್ತದೆ, ಮಾತಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬರ್ತದೆ ಮಂದಿ ಜೋಡಿ, ಬಟ್ ಭಾಷಣ ಕೊಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. I will stick to English, but a little bit of Kannada will happen because I studied in an English medium school. So my Kannada speaking from the stage is a little difficult. 3 days ago, Mr. Jirli told me that you were going to talk few words on the second, but instead now we are shifting you to the third, that is today. And Mr. Nagaraj, and I have heard Mr. Nagaraj, wonderful speaker, passionate speaker, who is, an unbelievable human being in the field of education. So I thought, what a beautiful day for me that Jirli sir shifted me to the next day and I get to hear Mr. Nagaraj. Unfortunately, you are hearing only Mr. Raj instead of Mr. Nagaraj. He could not come because of certain difficulties with his mother. So it is, you will have to, after having a wonderful breakfast of hearing Mr. Tyagraj, you have to now have lunch by listening to me. So I request your patience in listening to me. Okay, so his scale, Mr. Nagaraj's scale of thinking is something that I cannot match. But I will do my best to talk about certain ideas. I am not a teacher. I am just associated with education. So I can give you perspectives as an outsider based on my experience of being a consumer of education. I am not a teacher. So the topic that we have on hand is a journey from a teacher that you are to being a guru. And why is that essential? And how can it be done with all the problems that we have, all the difficulties that we have, all the lack of time that we have, the multiplicity of responsibilities that all of us have in our lives? How can we still transform ourselves from a teacher to a guru? But before we understand that, we have to look at what has been happening around us. It is a very, very different world than it was in 1947 when we gained independence. It is a very different world from the ones our parents lived in. And even though there are many who are in the 20s and in the 30s, it has become even a different world from 10 years ago. The pace of change and insertion of technology into our lives, or distractions as we can call them, because that's the other side of the coin, is something the world has never seen. If a man from 1850 walked into the India of today, and that is not a very long time in the history of the world, the man or woman would not recognize the world we are living in today. What was true in the 1960s, what was true in the 1970s, and this is not 100 years ago, but just 50-60 years ago, is vastly different. So the world is changing at a pace that is unprecedented over the past 2,500 years. The lucky part now for the India of today is those changes come to us concurrently. Before, if something happened in the West or in the advanced world, for it to come to India, it used to take a generation. So you are, with the beauty of the concurrence of technological advancement, there also is the difficulty of managing that responsibility. We as teachers, you as teachers, need to adapt to this pace of change. You are operating in a rapidly advancing world. You are operating in a different India, because India was marching to its own slow speed and the world was progressing at its own pace. But now that speed has become the same, which means the responsibilities upon you are even more. And the teacher in you will have to adapt to this. Today, we are a $4 trillion economy. To get to 1 trillion, it took us more than a few decades. But now at 4 trillion, if we use the simple scenario of doubling, like you had a fixed deposit, every 7-8 years it doubled. By 2047, which is 100 years from independence and not a very few years from now, it is expected to be a $32 trillion economy. Just think about it. Today we are 4 trillion. Per capita GDP about $2,500. 4 times that, $12,500 per capita. That is what is going to happen in the next 24 years. The potential is there. If we are going to be that kind of an economy, our students, because of our teachers, have to participate in this journey. Now, there are always 5 to 10% students, regardless of what the economy is, they are going to do well. But it's the next 40 to 60% who need to be made successful. Is it wrong for them to aspire to be part of this once in a few 100 years journey? Honestly, if you look at the history of economics of the world, Angus Madison has done a wonderful work, the late Angus Madison, and whatever India's glory was as one of the world's top economies was hundreds of years ago. After that we were at the bottom, near the bottom, and then finally we today have an opportunity to again rise to be among the top 3 economies in the world in your lifetimes over the next 23-24 years. But then, while the economy is doing well, are your students part of it? That is the challenge before you. And we don't need physical gurukulams like we had hundreds of years ago. But we need gurus who adapt to that concept of today. That is what we need. Now, over the past 20-30 years, I don't even need words. You just look at those logos and you know what those companies are. Okay? And these were companies, IBM was formed more than 75 years ago. It was a great computer company, but you don't see IBM here. These are all companies born over the last 30 years. All of them you know. Probably you do not know the last one, Gilead, because that was during the COVID thing we realized, but again a great company. Zoom, Airbnb, these were all born in the US just for comparison purposes. Okay? Dynamic US economy, all of that. But more importantly, India too, and therefore your students should also be made to create such companies for India and the world. And we are capable of doing that. That is the point of what a guru should be. You should motivate students to be able to accomplish such things. We have seen all of these, there are many more, but these are the few examples I could pick up. These are Indians leading global companies. They were born in India, educated in India, and today they are leading global companies. But they belong to the 5 to 10% that I told you who will do well anywhere. What we need, and I'm repeating myself, the next 40 to 60%, they need a guru to mentor them. Make them feel that they have a supporter, a listener, a guide who can be with them until they figure out their purpose in life and bloom. Now, why is this important? Family structures in India are changing rapidly. We used to have the joint family system with the good, with the bad. That is changing. Because of economic opportunities, joint families cannot stay in the same place. You have any family in Belgaum, you walk on any road, the son is in Bangalore, daughter is in Kolkata, all of these things. So you simply don't have that connectivity. That structure is not there. Therefore, the guru has to insert themselves into the position of that uncle or that aunt who would otherwise be available to the student. And especially with the technology, which is good, but which is insidious sometimes, it is very, very lonely for younger people to lead their lives. When I was a young child, and I'm sure many of you can agree with this example, if I was not studying, I could be found. Doing what? Playing cricket, playing some ball. Okay? So that is how I could be caught. Today, you can have a student sitting right in front of you, acting very, very serious, but totally engaged in something on the mobile. Okay? That is how things have changed. So, young minds today, with all of the technology that surrounds them, all of the information that surrounds them, tend to lead very, very unsocial lives and are immersed, many of them, not all of them, but are immersed in very, very lonely pursuits. And there is a crying need for a sense of community. And that is where the teacher, the guru, can play a very important role. Teaching can be about a podium, about a teacher, and a one-way speech. Surely that is how teaching can be done. But you will have to delve deeper into your psyche to say that your role is greater than that. Because remember one thing, all generations before the current ones, for the last 400-500 years, everything that was processed was by reading something. Books, the teacher offering notes, reading those notes. That is how information used to be processed by young minds. We today have the first few generations of young minds who process everything through images. Still images, moving images, video. The way they process information is quite different than the way many of us do. You give me something, I have to read it. But for a young mind, a TikTok video is good enough. That change, if our teachers and gurus don't adapt to, we are not asking you to make TikTok videos to teach your students. But understand the mindset of the student. That is extraordinarily important for you to make your pedagogical changes. As is said very often, in today's world of artificial intelligence that was spoken about earlier, and our traditional method of an exam once a year, where what you remembered was far more important than what you actually knew. Your knowledge is only useful if you can do with something with it nowadays. Because if it is all about knowledge, Google has it. So therefore, what's your advantage? And that is the kind of thinking that needs to go into your teaching methodologies to convince the young minds that just knowing something is not important. It is what you do with what you know is going to decide your destiny in the $32 trillion economy. That is critical. And again, we owe it to our children from these regions that they participate in that vibrant economy. The example that I can think of is you have children, young children on train stations selling cups of tea, selling some sweets, some treats. Okay, that child, let us say, sitting in the is selling that thing in the train, and the passengers can come from one part of India and go to another part of India. Do we want that child to stay in that same destination, same city, and never travel to the end destination of that train? And it is your role, a happy role, where you can help that child get onto the train and travel elsewhere. That is the role a guru can play. Going beyond classroom teaching and on your behalf displaying examples of superior work ethic, a respect for Indian values, and that is where you can be different. Because we have in many arenas a tendency to cut and paste what we see elsewhere into the Indian context, and that is totally wrong. Absolutely, absolutely wrong. We have to adapt it to the Indian situation, our values. So if I want my students, let us say, to be less agitated, you want to see agitation, go on Khanapur Road. Okay, there is a lot of anger to be seen. You will see young minds being very, very angry, stopping and making the drivers of cars feel very, very bad about what is happening, and people scolding, people getting out of the car and all that. There is a lot of anger. But if as a guru, you want your students to calm down, to meditate, and I'm not talking of any religion, simple mind meditation, calming your mind. If you were to introduce 30 seconds of meditation, 1 minute of meditation. The other day, Daji was here and an audience, this whole hall was full. Many of you were there. 20 minutes of meditation, pin drop silence. Literally, he helped us travel from our toes to our head. With our eyes closed, everybody sat quietly for 20 minutes. At the end of 20 minutes, it was so rejuvenating. So, can you not, into your pedagogy, rather than having just PowerPoint slides, also engage? Because it's not part of your syllabus. But these are the small things that you can do to help the younger generation, your students, adapt in an Indian way to the challenges of tomorrow. The benefits of empathy and the joy of thinking of greater good when it comes from a teacher is phenomenal in terms of convincing young minds to think differently. So, how do we go from teacher to guru? Okay. Excellence never went out of fashion. Honestly, excellence is what we need to inculcate and imbibe into our students. And when you practice excellence, when you expect excellence, but with empathy and helping those, because remember, the 5 to 10% don't need help. They'll take care of themselves. It's the 40 to 60 where you may have to spend extra time. Lead by personal example. Don't affect an artificial persona. Your students should see that you are real. They also will become real. Their values will change. Empathy is extraordinarily important in today's nuclear family world. Being empathetic, being caring about somebody else other than just yourself. They have to see it. They have to see you practicing it. Another important thing that you can inculcate in the young minds that are under your control, whether they are at school or college, this whole business of solving a problem. Okay, we are not innovators, we are not engineers, we are mere students. But there is a tendency in many young minds, I will do what I am told. That's it. Okay? I will not go beyond that. Because why should I? Instead, if you can convince young minds through examples that they should own the issue, it is your issue. Because if you are able to solve it by yourself with some help from others, but treating it as your own issue rather than something for somebody else, when the real situation happens in your life, you will be able to solve it so much better. That kind of pedagogy is insertion of that thinking, which is again beyond the syllabus. That is very necessary. You should also convince them that learning never stops. I got a paper degree, end of story. No. Especially in today's world, as technology is changing rapidly, artificial intelligence is entering every possible corner. If I'm a pathologist today, artificial intelligence and NVIDIA chips and the related software, if there are 5 million X-rays that were taken by a company over, let us say, the last 20 years, and those images are available. Now, can you imagine a pathologist or a radiologist spending time to go over 5 million X-rays to understand, Baba, if this something happens, okay, now it means that if something else is there, it means that before that doctor draws the conclusion, the doctor will be dead. But with artificial intelligence, you can go through 5 million X-rays within a day and have conclusions. So when that kind of intelligence is available technologically, do we not want our students to be able to process information and make it useful for them for their productive lives? So learning should never stop. Reinvention, people have to reinvent. Over the next 20, 30, 40 years, it will never happen that a person started in a job or in an industry at point A and they end up still at point A. Constant reinvention, debate, discussion, and a very important thought. Life is multidisciplinary. If I am a mechanical engineer, I cannot just think mechanical engineering. I have to think a little electrical. I have to think a little electronics. If I am a business major, I need to understand the humanities. Life is becoming increasingly multidisciplinary. At the end of the day, Steve Jobs, the famous gentleman from Apple, the man who in 2005 gave the world the iPhone. Phones were there before, phones have been there afterwards, but this was the first phone where there was no keyboard. Okay. Somewhere he had the vision and the foresight and the power to job on his engineers into saying, junk the keyboard. And he famously said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. There are so many dots of thoughts, ideas, expressions, but you can't connect the, because if you're looking forward, you can't connect the dots. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. That thought has been further refined by the CEO of Netflix. And he says, the point is to encourage people to question how the dots are connected. In most situations, people join the dots the same way. And everybody else has done it the same way. The dots are connected point A to point C to point Z to this one. This preserves the status quo. Status quo is good, makes for easy living. But one day someone comes along and connects the dots in a different way, which leads to an entirely different way of understanding the world. And that is what we can hope with our pedagogical change to influence our young minds to do. Think about the dots, introspect, but give them mechanisms, tools, mentorship, support, confidence, so that they can even think of connecting the dots differently. So in closing, I thank the ACPR for having made me part of such a wonderful morning. I thank you for your patient listening, and I am humbled by your listening of my talk. Thank you so much.